interesting tutorial. Right there on the thumbnail you can see we have a 3-tier ruffled gown. Okay, so the ruffled part of this gown, 3-tiered, that's what we are going to construct in this class. Okay, so I'll be showing you how to sew this and have a good result at the end of the day. So this 3-tier gown, we are going to have some calculations to achieve that. So we are working with a round waist, okay, and this round waist, I'll be pretending I have the waist at 20 inches, and the base of this 3-tier gown is going to be a doll face satin fabric. As you can see, that will serve as my base. So you can work with any base of your choice. You can even work with a bobinette felt. You can work with anything, okay. You can even work with an organza. So provided you sew on top of it and it holds it down for you. So I'm working with a doll face satin fabric right here. So you choose your color. So this doll face base is going to be cut. The whole waist is going to be cut at 180 degrees. And when you are cutting 180 degrees flay, it means you divide your circumference by 3.14. So this circumference has been divided by 3.14 and I have 6 points. So I will ignore the rest of the figures and I'm working with 6 inches as my radius. So I will be using 6 inches as my radius. I'll be the full length of this 3-tier, the down part from the front length to the hip or below the hip. Okay, after the hip, as you can see, is by choice, but for this class I'm working with 15 inches. So you measure yours and find out what works out well for you. If you need it longer or you need it the way it is on the thumbnail, but for me, from the front length, which is your natural waistline, to the length, my desired length is 15 inches. So this 15 inches is what I'll be working with a radius of 6 inches. So this 15 inches is actually the length of this gown after making it. That is after making this gown, 15 inches. But the base that will carry this gown, I'm going to take off 15, take away 3 from it. So I will work with 12 for the base. But after attaching this tool, the whole length will give us 15 inches. I believe you understand my explanation. So right now, I'm going to cut my gown, my base. So my base, as usual, if you are cutting 360, you can see what I did, 180. I just folded my fabric by only 2. That is if you are cutting 180. So here is unfold, as you can see. So next is to cut the radius, and the radius I have here, I'll place my tape, I'll mark it out as 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches, 6 inches, like that. So this is my 6 inches. So once I've gotten my 6 inches, next is the length, which is 12 inches. So I'll place my tape on the line of the radius and I'll be marking 12 inches plus hemming allowance, that's 13 inches. So make sure you add, because at the end of the day you are going to hem that part. So I'll just add 13. So I've shifted and I've marked my 13 inches. So I'll just go ahead and cut. Okay, so you can see my flay right now. I'll now come over to the radius. So that is the waist part of this skirt. Alright, so this is what I have right now. So before I open up, I'm going to work on how to sew it right on this. Let me call this the front, and this, the whole of this is the back. So I'll place my tape right now. I have 13 inches like I told you. Our line is supposed to stop at 12. Okay, it's supposed to stop at 12 for the base, but I'll use 13, the rest of 1 inch, to fold or to run the hem or to serge or whatever. At the end of the day, I come back to 13. So the first flay will be sewn on this line, which is the waistline. It is a 3-tier gown. That means I'm going to sew at 3 places. So this is the first sewing of my tool. The second sewing of my tool, I'm going to sew the second sewing of my tool at 4.5 inches. Okay, so this depends on the length you are working with. So if you are working with a longer length, then it means you are not going to follow my 4.5. You can make it 5 or 6. So I'm working with 4.5 here because the my whole length is at 15 inches. Okay, so by the time I have my whole length as 15 inches, I'm cutting my tool at 6.5, okay, at length. So I'm marking 4.5 because my first tool will stop at 6.5. I counted 1, 2 back. So if I sew the first two, it will fall at 6.5. Okay, so the second two, if I sew it at that 4.5, it will fall at another 6.5. Can you see that? So the first one, the second one, and the third one, from this point I will measure another 4.5. So 4.5 is now the sewing point. So you have to check out the length of what you have, and that will determine what you are going to sew. Okay, so from here I'll measure 4.5. I'll measure 4.5. So 4.5 becomes my second line. So the tip or the trick to making a tiered gown is this. You have to determine your full length, including the tool. Your full length, like mine, including the tool, is 15. And I went 3 inches up. 1, 2, 3. That is the first thing you do. You go 3 inches up because the base and the tool will not be at the same length. So my full length, everything is 15 inches. And when I went 1, 2, 3 up, I had 12. Okay, before I added my seam allowance. So at these 12 inches now, you can see from here to here is 12 inches. Okay, so alright, so I've marked out my 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. So once you have taken your 3 inches off, you now use your brain to check your distance for. Okay, you now check what you have. If maybe the length of this is like 15, I won't be making use of 4.5. It means I'm going to extend this to either 6, because after 6 another is 12. You can see where my line is, like that. So but note that whatever stitching line you make, you need to also add 2 inches for your cutting of the tool. So I'm going to cut my tool now, and I'm using only this. Remember that this is supposed to be open for the front and back. So if this is opening now, the whole of the round waist, it means this 4.5, I'm going to make the line, my chalk line for 4.5. That is where I'm going to sew it from end to end. But for the purpose of this tutorial and demonstrating it, I'm not sewing from end to end. I just sew on only the line I have right here. Okay, so I've marked out this is my first line, second, third for the 3 tier, and the length is 2 inches added to what I used, which is 6.5 as explained. So I'll take off this and I'll come with my tool right away. So this is my tool. And how many yards of tool you need depends on your length. Let me explain that. How many yards of tool you'll be using depends on what you measure. So if I'm measuring the first line of tool, let me say I'm sewing my tool here, so you can see me measuring the tool. Here I have 34 inches. So these 34 inches, I'll go ahead on my paper and I'll write first line is 34, second line and third line, because it's a 3-tier ruffled gown. So I've measured 34. Okay, sorry, this is the first one. We are sewing on this, don't forget, on the waistline first. So I'll measure the first line is 20. So I'll come here and write 20. This is the 34, which is the second one. And the third line, I'll measure the third line. The third line, fine. I have 47. So I've gotten all my lines. So for you to get the full of this, you have to multiply. If you really want it full, you are going to multiply this by, for each line, you can multiply by, because we are working with 2, you can multiply by 5, by 5, by 5. So if I multiply 20 by 5, I'll be having 100 inches. 100 inches. So this 100 inches means your tool, you are going to make the length of it. If you measure the length of your tool, let's say we measure this way, you can see what I have here is a yard, which is 36 and 44. So for the first line, a yard comes at 36 inches. So you do 100 divided by 36. And if I do 100 divided by 36, I have about 2 points, let me say 2.5 yard. That is on the length. But 2 comes on normal length of 60 inches. 2 comes at normal length of 60 inches. Okay, that is the length of 2 comes at 60 inches. But I need 2.5 inches for the first layer. Now I'm cutting these 2.5 inches at 6 inches. Okay, 6 inches. So you do 60 divided by 6. Out of 2.5, I'll be getting 10 lines. That is 10 twos. So this particular 10 can do me, because I'm sewing 3. Okay, so if I have 10, I'm sewing 3 in 1, 3 in 1. So I'll just cut them and pick 3 for 1, 3 for 1. So in other words, I will advise you choose the third line, which is 47 times 5. Okay, so if you multiply 47 by 5, whatever it gives you, I believe you understand. So divide it by 36 and use it and cut your 6.5 inches. 2 comes at 60. Just cut it and pick them one after the other. Okay, so you have to do your calculation depending on the waist you are working with. That will help you to note how many yards of tool you are going to, because sizes differ. If you are working for a plus size, the same yardage will not give you with a slim person. So your calculation also has to be what we have just done there right now. So you take the measurement of what you have cut, okay, multiply it by 5, your result divided by 36 will give you how many yards. So for this, if I'm working on the first line, I'll be using 2.5, that is 2.5 yards. And these 2.5 yards can also give me finish the first line, and I use it for the second line because I've told you the length of 2 comes at 60, and we are picking 3 to sew one line. So I'll now cut my 2. As you can see, for this demonstration I'm using 1.5 for my demonstration. So all I'm going to do now is to fold my 2. So I'm just folding my 2 at random. Okay, remember I'm working with 6.5, but this time around I'll just fold. Can you see how I'm folding it? So when you are working on your 2, you can fold at 8 inches, then measure out your 6.5. So remember that this 6.5, we will make it 7 because we will sew half an inch. So I've arranged my 2 for cutting. So if you don't arrange your 2 this way, you might not have a good result for cutting. So you can see how I placed it. So I can now cut. So I'm checking, I think there are some parts that are laying on each other, so don't allow it to lay. Alright, so if you are sure you have arranged it appropriately, now you can start. You can trim off the first edge. That will start as your will serve as your starting point. So you can see me trimming off the first edge because tool can behave somehow. It can actually behave somehow, so you need to have a starting base. Okay, so and that is how to achieve a perfect starting base. So I'll also trim this other edge, knowing that I've gotten another starting edge, and I'll start measuring 7. So this time we are working on 7. Remember, we are sewing in half an inch. So at this end, I'll also make a square of my line. So this is how to cut your 2. Okay, so everything now is equal and at the same pace. So I'll just go ahead and pick. Remember, I'm working with 3 for one layer, but for the purpose of this tutorial I don't have enough. I'll just work with 2. Pick 2 for each, 2 for each. So now I've picked the first 2, and I'll keep the rest 4 for the other lines. So you can see how I picked it. So when you are picking it, please make sure you don't disorganize the edges. So I'll go over to the machine now, and I'm going to make my gathers. I'll gather. Okay, so once I gather, I will sew it the first line. Like I said, I'm not using the whole of this, but if you're using the whole of this, you need to spread your your tool. Okay, so but I'm just folding this. So the first one now, I'm going to sew the first line. Remember, I have two of it right here, two pieces of it right here. So I'll just make ruffles and sew the ruffles, okay, in this first line. But when you are sewing, please, you need to start your sewing from below. Okay, so I'm starting from below, so you have, you know, space to sew the rest of it. So I'll just go ahead and sew and make gathers. Just go to your machine, make gathers the way you know how, and then sew on top. I'll do that now. All right, so like I said, I don't have enough to, but this is to demonstrate to you. So whatever length you calculated and multiplied by 5, you can even multiply by 10. It depends on how full you want it to be. Okay, so this is the first tool. I've sewn it down. I'll pick up another 2. Remember, you are supposed to pick 3, but because I don't have enough of this, I'm picking 2 because that is what I have here. So I've sewn the first. Like I said, you need to start from below. So the next one, I'm going to also start from here. So you can also use your hands if you can, you know, make gathers with your hands. If your maybe machine is giving you issues, or you don't have a good machine for gathers, you can just be picking them this way and be sewing. Okay, so if you know that method, you can still make gathers with it. So I'll go and sew the second one now, and I'll bring it back for you to see. All right, so I've sewn the second layer. Okay, so I'm going to sew the last one right now. So the last one will be sewn right on the waistline. Okay, so I'll just do that now, and I'll be back to show you. All right, so I've sewn the first layer. Okay, so this is the first layer. So like I said, you need to have your calculation done appropriately. Okay, so this is the first, second, third. So the next thing is you need the color of your base to rhyme or match up with this, because you can see 2 can be transparent. For here, I'm seeing the black piece, which is not right. So the color of your base must be the color of your tool, so you don't have anything showing as well, and your calculation has to be enough to put these tools together. So by the time the tools are well gathered, you won't see anything at all. Okay, so another correction I want to make right here, because these tools, as I place one, the distance is too close for them. So I will suggest you bring the distance a little higher. What do I mean by that? I mean a little closer. So we had our calculation from the first one by 4 inches. So I'll prefer to do the next one 3 inches and another 3 inches. Please take note of that. It has to be a little closer with the length of 6 inches. So the difference we had before was 2 inches. If you remember, we did 4.5. So since I'm working with 6.5, I'll prefer to do half of it, 6.5, which is about 3 inches. So it covers well for you. So like this one right now, you can see where it is, and this is what we have left. So if you bring it a little more closer, you have this coverage, cover more appropriately. So that is how to go about the sewing of the 3 tiers. So the how many yards you are going to use depends on size. So you can just go by the calculation I just showed you, and you'll be able to get this appropriately. So thank you very much for coming to this tutorial, and see you in the next class. Bye.